Hello and welcome all back to Election Time News America. Today is Wednesday, July 16th, 2025, and today we're going to be going over the 2026 United States Senate elections. We're also going to be looking at the wins above replacement as well as the calculations for just PVI plus the overall comparing to the PVI, which is a very preliminary strength metric. But then also we also have split tickets win above replacement statistic, which we're also going to be using, and also computing that in with potential nominees based on what we know about them. Like for example, in Texas, Colin Allred, and in Nebraska, we also have a few other candidates. We're going to be getting into that as well. Election Time News, your one stop for all things elections and politics, from summations to poll reviews and news. Subscribe below for more content like this about American, Canadian, and Australian elections. Australia, don't worry, we will be getting to the 2025 Tasmanian state election next video 2 days from now, the 18th, and then morning of the 19th, I'll be releasing my official prediction video. The first one's going to be a bit more informative. And also, make sure to follow the Substack for Today in Politics. The podcast will be hosted on there. It will also be on YouTube, but it will be hosted on Substack. Also, make sure to follow the Threads, Instagram, and X. All of those, and the Twitter are going to be continuing to keep being posted regularly. Remember, there's never a dull moment in politics. So now we're going to be getting into the overall map. So here we have the wins above replacement map, and here we have the general difference map. I'm going to be keeping both of them because they sometimes have different results. To start things off in Alabama, so first we have the PVI, which is going to be the overall how the state votes compared to the nation, and then here we have the national environment, which means that we would calculate the overall the result. But then we also have the strength of the candidates, which is going to be based off of the win above replacement rating, or there's also a second column which also calculates for the compared to the PVI expected performance. So that means that they are over or underperform. Now, of course, if the incumbent is not running, which would mean a 0, then obviously we can't say anything about gauging the incumbent's strength. So it just ignores it. That's why these numbers are exactly the same. So, to start things off in Alabama, we're going to go in alphabetical order. Start things off in Alabama, 28.9 on both sides. This was a relatively poor performance uh, for the Republicans back in 2020, but it was because it was a flip, because the special election was won by Doug Jones. But Tuberville flipped it. He is now retiring, and he's going to run for governor. So that is why that is a retirement. Next up, we have the state of Alaska, which is going to be 9 points on the war map here and 10 on the difference map. Now, something funny and interesting is if, just purely based off of that, if you look here, we can see that Mary Peltola is a potential Democratic Party candidate. She has not stated whether she's going to run or not. Now, Tom Begich would actually be a pretty good candidate, but Mary Peltola, if she decided to run based on her own ranking of 9.1 for when she ran in 2024 in the House, that would mean that the seat would likely flip to a point 0.1. So that's just something really interesting that I saw. Based on that, it would narrowly flip, but because she is more likely going to run for governor, we will leave that out. Arkansas, 29 and 30.3 in order there. Both of those are strong Republican performances. That's not to be unexpected. Colorado, 14.3 on the above replacement map, and then we have 12.1 on the difference map. Hickenlooper flipped the seat in 2020, and he did relatively well doing so, winning by 9.3%. He said that this is his final term in the Senate. Delaware, 19.4 for the win above replacement map, but all the way up at 24 for the difference map here. That's mainly due to a difference here from 7.9 to only 3 for the war rating. Georgia, Ossoff is a relatively strong candidate, and I didn't plug in Buddy Carter's information in here yet, or any potential other candidates. Buddy Carter is most likely going to be the candidate here. So if we look at the first district's results, we can see that it's 2.4. So if we then add 2.4 to the number here, then I did the wrong one. Then we just add 2.4. Then we end up having a result of -4, which is, interestingly enough, the exact same result of the national difference. So, but either way, what this shows is that since he was flipping a seat and won by 3.7, that means the war rating they have it as 6.1. He is a very strong candidate. But because we don't know that Buddy Carter is going to be running, or that he will win the nomination here, he is most likely going to win though. So I will actually leave it as 4. So, it is going to be lean on both maps, expected to be 4 points. Now, of course, it was over 6 without Buddy Carter. Idaho, just under 30 points, a slightly weak candidate, but that does not put them at risk whatsoever. It is the state of Idaho, PVI of 35.3. Illinois, no incumbency. That means it's going to be a 12.7 point margin. It's going to be 12.2 plus 0.5. It's quite that simple. Dick Durbin is retiring. He overperformed by 6.1, but according to Split Ticket, he is still actually an underperformer and a relatively weak candidate. Iowa, Joni Ernst is a very weak candidate, 4.3 for the war rating and 8.68 underperformance here in 2020. 8.1 is going to be the ranking for war here, but based on the performance here itself, is actually going to be a lean margin, which is going to be 3.7. Pretty close, and especially if you end up having a very strong candidate in here, potentially one that is a House member, for example. You do have potential running here, but J.D. Scholten, state representative for the 1st District, they don't have that. Nominee for the 4th District, he underperformed there, I think, in 2018 and 2020. So that means that we can then go to the win above replacement for that, see how strong of a candidate he is, and we can then see that he was the Democratic nominee and he won by 4.1. So if he's able to win, that would be the war rating, but if you added that in there, he would actually flip the state of Iowa. Now, this is actually a prime ground. This is probably the largest sleeper flip on the map. It's going to be the state of Iowa. Kansas is exactly identical at 8.1 points, and it's going to be 8.7 on the difference map. Poor performance here, barely won by 11.5 in 2020. Marshall is not a strong candidate by any means. Now you have Kentucky, 29.3, finally freed of the poor performance of Mitch McConnell, who regularly won by abysmal numbers for Kentucky, by under 20 on the exact same ballot that Trump won the state of Kentucky by an entire 26 points. So it's a 6-point underperformance. Pretty poor numbers there from Kentucky, and he has for a long time, winning by 15.5 in the red wave year of 2014 when Gardner flipped the seat in New Mexico, for example. So he's been a poor performer for a long time. He is finally retiring. 29.3 on the map. Louisiana, 23.7 and 30.7. This is actually due to the difference here of very strong overperformance for Cassidy on the PVI expected performance versus not that strong for the war rating. Maine, Susan Collins is expected to win by 5.8 to 5.9%. You could actually put in the calculation here and actually put in that if he had decided to run, you could put in 5.9 for Jared Golden, which hilariously enough would actually legitimately mean that it's even. But instead, he has declined to run. He is running again in the 2nd District, which means that this is going to basically be a free seat for the Republicans to be able to hold on to, even though she is relatively unpopular. Massachusetts, 25 and 35. Those are very, very different numbers here. That's because of a strong overperformance, but is actually a relatively weak candidate according to Split Ticket. Michigan, this one's interesting. For the war, it's actually going to be 1.1 points. That's going to be including the calculation for Andy Levin here, I believe, is the candidate that is running. That's going to be vacating the 9th District. Mike Rogers, actually, nominee for U.S. Senate. So then we actually look at the U.S. Senate, 1.3, plug in that calculation to the 0.2 that's expected, then it actually ends up staying blue. Otherwise, if you don't include that and you have no incumbency, then you actually default to 0.2 for the PVI, which means that this would actually flip on the Senate map to the Republicans. But that's no information on candidates whatsoever, just the state itself. Minnesota 6.1, that's because there's no actual information there. But if we actually then look at the fact that most likely Penny Flanagan, I believe, is the one that's going to end up, and Penny Flanagan, Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota. But if we put in the information for Angie Craig, since we do have information on the second district, 6.7, just for that, that would double the margin. But if we then look at Peggy Flanagan, who's actually more likely to win the seat, then we do actually have no, she was never in the House. So we do not have any information for Penny Flanagan if she is likely to win, though. But if it does actually end up being Angie Craig, we do have information on that, and she would double her margin based off of the war. And that would actually be a safe margin, more so actually than Tina Smith won by in 2020, and it's already expected to be more than that anyways. In Mississippi, Hyde Smith, relatively poor performance candidate here. Actually, on the difference map, it's going to be 6 points, which is very, very poor. 7 points, but 12 for the war rating. Either way, very poor candidate. Strong underperformer in Hyde Smith. Won by 9.8 in 2020. 9.98 in 2020. In Montana, we have 7.8 and 7.3. This is just because Steve Bullock was the last person to contest this seat on the Democratic side. He was a very popular governor as a Democrat. 10.02 for Daines. That's more of a strength. This is going to be more strength from Bullock than weakness for Daines. So that's going to kind of mess that up a bit. Nebraska, this one's interesting, 18 points for just the pure difference map. But if we look at this map, it's actually going to only be 0.8 because we have the strength here from 2024. If we look at the 17.7 point overperformance by Dan Osborne, very strong candidate here, 0.8. That is well within reach at this point in time. He also had in his own poll, he did officially decide to run last week. Dan Osborne here. Pete Ricketts is very likely to run, but it's to be decided at this point still. He has not won the most likely not really going to be competitive Republican primary. So all right. So then we have independents. He did have one poll that was done by his campaign to figure out whether or not he wanted to run. This was by his exploratory campaign. He was only losing by 1. So that actually kind of checks out here being 0.8. So then we go to New Hampshire. Here we have the calculation also including the 3.2 overperformance by Chris Pappas. He is the better of the two candidates. So Maggie Goodlander was potentially running, but instead Chris Pappas is running instead. He is the stronger of the two, as I said. Jeanne Shaheen is retiring, but then we end up with a 7.8 point margin for war here. In New Hampshire. That's still quite a bit less than Jeanne Shaheen did, 15.6. That's halving it. But still, that's actually better than just by the pure difference, which is going to be just 4.6 percentage points for the Democrats. New Jersey war, apparently, according to Split Ticket, Cory Booker's actually an underperformer candidate, 0.9%, but he overperformed by 11 points. That's going to be the large disparity here. Both of them are, in fact, still safe for the Democrats. Actually, no, New Jersey is likely on the war map, 7.1 points. Then we go to New Mexico, 5 points here on the war map, 8.9 for the difference map. Both of those are going to be likely. Underperformer in general by 2.7 points for Lujan. North Carolina is going to be 1.3. There's no, unfortunately, there's no war calculations for the for governors. Otherwise, I'd be able to show Roy Cooper's. But since he also hasn't announced he's going to run, we're going to leave this as 1.3 percentage points on both. But we do see here that strong underperformance by Thom Tillis, 3.2 percentage points. Underperformance here and 2.31 underperformance compared to the PVI. He is retiring, so that should actually help the Republicans. But if we look at the case here on the general election hypothetical polling, Roy Cooper has won every single poll, even though he has not announced that he is going to run. And he also did get a an endorsement from the Attorney General of North Carolina, Jeff Jackson. So, and then we have the state of Oklahoma, 25 and 27. Neither of those are at all competitive by any means. Oregon, 16 points. And then we also have 20 on the difference map here. So those are both going to be very, very strong Democratic performances. Same thing for Rhode Island, 26. And then we also have 35. That's going to be because of a 20-point overperformance, 10.9 WAR rating. That's why they're so different. South Carolina is going to be 11 points on the WAR map, but interestingly here on the difference map, it's actually going to only be a likely rating at 7.5. That's because of a 8.8 underperformance, 5.3 Democratic WAR rating. That's going to be very, very close. 10.3 for Graham, just barely over 10 in 2020. Expect to be a bit more Democratic than that. Next, we're looking at South Dakota, 27 and 28. Neither of those are expected to be that poor or that blue by any means. Rounds is probably going to win, not by 31 like he did, but still 27 and 28 points. Those, by those calculations, are still going to be very safe seats for the Republicans. Tennessee, 29 and 24. Both those are very safe. There's quite a bit of variation there, but that's going to be because of actually strength from the WAR rating, but weakness from the comparative PVI rating. Now, Texas, this is going to be interesting. Now, this also depends on if he ends up winning the overall ranking, but if he doesn't, then it completely goes downhill. But interestingly enough, this would actually still stay minus 6.6. So that would actually help the Republicans by just a little bit. But if he ends up losing, that's going to go up to 4.8, but right now he is not. So 4.1 points is going to be for the WAR rating. That's because we know the WAR rating based on the 2024 performance of Colin Allred, 6.6 points against Ted Cruz. There's also a bit of weakness against Ted Cruz, but as of right now, we're going to plug that in there, plus a bit of weakness from him from last cycle. So 6.6 in there is going to be 4.1 on the WAR map. That is still going to stay red. 6.9 for the difference map, which means that Republicans on this map, with the flip in Michigan, will hold on to Senate control. Not yet on the WAR map. Virginia will be safe on both. Mark Warner is a relatively strong candidate here. He won by 12 in 2020. That would actually be a bit less from the WAR map, 2.1 there. Interestingly enough, but that's going to be because of a lower PVI. And then West Virginia and Wyoming are both going to be safe at this time here. Safe mark rankings for both of them, bringing Republicans up to 51 on the WAR map and up to 52 on the difference map. And then we are left with the two special elections, Ohio and Florida. Ohio is expected to be a flat 10-point margin there, just purely based off of that. There's no real strength there. We don't know any numbers on how well he might do. That's going to be the special election in Ohio. John Husted is relatively strong candidate. He's not, an amazing one, though. He did okay, though. He ran alongside Mike DeWine in 2022. So, really strong. And then Ashley Moody in Florida, expected to win by 11.4 according to this, which is literally just adding these two together. It's nothing that special. So that's going to be very, very preliminary there, which means that in the WAR map, we have still 53-47 with no flips at all, but a very interesting composition. And then we have on the difference map, we actually have a flip for the Republicans, and it is 54-46 with some more interesting numbers here. We also actually have a very close Mississippi, closer South Carolina, very close Iowa. But then on the WAR map, this feels a bit more realistic, that we could see something on election night with a relatively close Texas. On a good Democratic night, we could probably see Ohio dropping in. Now, interesting thing is, if we could take this number and then we go and drop in this plus this, and then we look at what if Sherrod Brown enters the race. He is the one that just lost the last election to Bernie Moreno. And so if we look at split tickets 2024, 4.6 points above replacement. So then we were going to look at minus 4.4. That's now going to go down to 4.4, 4.6, 4.6. So that's going to be 4.6 points, which means it's actually going to go down to 5.4 points on the wins above replacement map. So that is interestingly still going to be a loss for the Democrats, even with Sherrod Brown in the race. There's no polls, hypothetically, even, I don't think. But then you end up with a hypothetical polling here. Sherrod Brown is actually losing to John Husted in all of these polls by 3 and 6 points. And then he's also beating Tim Ryan, who actually better for the Democrats should run for governor. So then you end up with the okay, I thought so. So then you end up with a 5.4 point margin there if he does end up running. He hasn't declared that he's going to run yet, so that is in fact not going to be considered. Meanwhile, all of the other ones are in fact declared runners. So for that reason, then we do have our final map, which is going to be 5347, 5446, based off of those two calculations, which of course are very preliminary still, and I don't have any actual calculations yet. That will take a while, and I'm gonna have to do a lot more research into that and such. So thank you all so much for watching today's video. Make sure to subscribe if you are not already. We are slowly cruising towards more and more. Thank you all so much for everyone participating here. And so make sure to follow all of the channels and have a fantastic rest of your day.